in this video I'm going to introduce you to the concept of clefs and staff, or staves if we have more than one. And to do that I'm going to be talking about the way that we in music organize our clef and our staff such that they communicate information to us that we need to be able to realize music, to create music in the real world, in sound. Remember that in any of these videos where we are talking about music theory is a means to an end and not an end in itself. It enables us to create sound and therefore to create music. And music, the sound world we create, is ultimately what music is about. The writing on the wall or on the page is a way of communicating to the player what they need to do. So how do we go about doing that? Well, in music we use a system which has evolved over time, a system of having 5 lines and 4 spaces. The 5 lines create the 4 spaces, and we notate pitch on these lines and spaces. We can also go above and below the lines and spaces. That will come in a later video. So we have 4 lines and 5 spaces, and we are notating and communicating pitch. So what is pitch? Well, pitch is simply the sound of the note in the air, the sound we make. My voice is creating a pitch even as I speak, but I could create a more specific pitch by actually singing, by actually saying la, 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 whatever it might be. Or I could do it on a piano, or I could do it on a trombone or a violin, or whatever it might be. We create pitch. We create sound waves in the air which our ears hear as a distinct pitch or note. Now, because we hear pitch as a distinct note, we need a way to represent that on paper. And that is what the staff and the clef do. There are 2 clefs that are common in usage. The first of these is the so-called treble clef. It looks like this, and it is referred to as a treble clef, but it is also referred to, or perhaps even more accurately referred to, as the G clef. And that is because this particular part of the clef, where it wraps back around on itself, is on a line which is designated the note G. And we'll look at that in a moment when I explain the other lines and spaces and what notes are there. You'll see that this line is G. So what are the other notes? Well, before we get into that, we need to just know that in music we use something which is often referred to as the musical alphabet. The musical alphabet is simply labels. We, in order to be able to notate pitch, we need to give pitch a name. So we say this pitch, la, is this name. And that name is simply a letter of the alphabet. And the way that we in Western music have organized our use of notes and of pitch results in our needing 7 distinct labels. So we use the first 7 notes of the alphabet. A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. Now, those are not the only notes that we have. There are some notes that occur between these notes. We'll get to those in a later video as well. But in order to have a basic set of reference labels for pitch, for sound, we use these letters of the alphabet. So where do these letters of the alphabet fall if you have this clef in place? Which notes, A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, which of those notes are assigned to the lines and spaces if this clef is the clef that's being used? Well, the answer is this: E, G, B, D, and F for the lines. F, A, C, E for the spaces. Now, if I move up, going from line to space, you'll notice that I immediately drop into the alphabet. Things move as you would expect, alphabetically. E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F. Okay? Notice that when we get to G, things start to repeat. So from G we go to A, B, C, D. We only use those 7 letters. What we have done here is we have said if this clef is in place, then this line represents the note E. And it's a very specific note in the sound realm of notes that we can hear as humans. It's a very specific note. Not just any E, but a very specific E. What we've also observed here is that in fact notes like the note E can appear more than one time in this spectrum of sound that we hear. Human beings are able to hear a certain amount of sound, from certain low pitches to certain high pitches. We are able to perceive those. And if you move too high, we cannot perceive them anymore. Too low, equally, we cannot perceive them. We cannot hear them. We may feel them sometimes, but we cannot hear them. And so as we look through at these lines and spaces, we will notice that those sounds, those notes, recur at different points. So E is here, E is also here, F is here, F is also here. We'll define that a little bit more again in later videos. For now, the concept is we have a clef. That clef determines certain notes. And those notes are E, G, B, D, F, and F, A, C, E. You need to know this clef. This clef is important. It's going to be used constantly in our understanding of music theory. What though, if we want to go higher than that or lower than that? Are there other clefs? Indeed there are. There are a number of other clefs. So we will look at a number more. We'll look at about 3 or 4 more clefs, but we're specifically going to focus on 2 clefs. This one is the treble clef, and notice, as I said, it's sometimes called the G clef because indeed the note G is the note around which the end of the clef circles. Another clef that we can encounter quite frequently is the bass clef, the so-called bass clef. It looks like this. And it is sometimes also called the F clef because where, again, the clef circles, there, that denotes the note F. And again, now we have the principle that this clef is going to tell us what notes are on the lines and what notes are in the spaces. That's what a clef does. So what are they for the bass clef? Well, they are these: G, B, D, F, and A for the lines, and A, C, E, G for the spaces. If you have this clef, the bass clef, or sometimes called the F clef, if you have that clef, then the lines are G, B, D, F, A, the spaces are A, C, E, G. Again, G, A, B, C, D, as you move up following the musical alphabet. And so you need to learn this clef as well. The treble and the bass clef are very important. They define the staff. The staff is then a reference tool for telling us what notes to play at any given point, what pitch to play. There are some other things that tell us the rhythm to play, or how loud to play the note, or how long to play the note for. All of those kind of things we'll look at down the road. But right now, we're concentrating on how do we determine and communicate pitch. And we do that with the treble and the bass clef. Now, I said there were other clefs, and we certainly do need to look at a couple of other clefs. One of them is, and you should make sure you have a note of this, because this is important. You need to learn these notes. You need to learn them quickly and instantly. There cannot be any time delay. You cannot have to say, okay, the space with the treble clef, that's F. You just need to know. If I put a note here, what note is it? It's F. You have to know that. And if you don't know that, now is the time to get to the point where you are very, very fluent with it. Use flashcards, whatever techniques you need to use, get together with friends, try and figure out how to know these notes so that they are instant recognition. With the next 2 clefs, you may not have to know them quite so instantly, quite so soon. Down the road, certainly, it would be very useful to know these clefs as well. So they are as follows. They are generally called the C clefs. and it is for the same reason that this clef is sometimes called the G clef and the bass clef is sometimes called the F clef, because as a clef they show you where the note C is. The first of them looks like this, and the second that we're going to look at looks like this. You may have seen these clefs in printed music. There is an easier shorthand way to write these clefs. The first one like this, the second one like this. This one is sometimes called the alto clef, and this one sometimes called the tenor clef, because they were traditionally used for alto and tenor voice parts. This is called the treble clef because it was traditionally used for the treble voices, the boy trebles in British choral music. And the bass clef is called the bass clef because it was traditionally used for the bass singers. A lot of what we talk about in music theory comes from a tradition of choral singing that helped to lay the foundations of how music theory and how music in the Western world would operate and work. So we have some terms left over from that. And treble, bass, alto and tenor as clef names are some of those terms. This clef is actually very movable. All clefs are movable. You can move them up and down, and all they do is determine by what line comes through the middle or what line the end of the clef circles around. It determines a note. This determines the note G. These clefs determine the note C. In fact, this is really one clef in two different positions. That makes sense? And it could be in multiple other positions, but it is traditionally used most often in one of these two positions. If you're a viola player, you would have been used to playing the alto clef. It's the clef that the viola reads as a standard clef, a starting clef. If you are a fairly advanced trombone player or a cello player, you may be used to the tenor clef. Those instruments learn the bass clef to start with, but then they go on into the tenor clef. So clefs are used by different instruments, different times, different ways, but they all follow the same principle. They determine the notes of the lines and spaces of the staff. And in this case, if this is the note C, you can then work out that the note above will be D because we follow the musical alphabet, then E, then F, and the same would be true here. If this is the note C because it goes through the middle of the clef, then this is D, E, F. If you go down, then the notes would go down the musical alphabet. These clefs you should be aware of. You should know they exist. You should be able to define how they work. If you were given a note in one of these clefs and told to identify it, you should be able to work by using the musical alphabet. You should be able to go up or down from the note C, and you should be able to clearly identify the note. But I'm not asking you at this point to learn these clefs so that they are second nature. The other two clefs, the treble and bass, they need to be learned that way. The alto clef and the tenor clef, or the movable C clef as a generic term, you can certainly know the principle for those, and down the road I think it would be good to learn them. And if you're learning the other two clefs and you want to go ahead and learn these now, go ahead and do it. But it's not absolutely required at this point in time. So this is an introduction to clefs and to how clefs work and how clefs denote notes on a staff. And as we go into the next videos, we'll take this information and go just a little bit further with it. Thank you.